Welcome to Mystara, and get ready to start shopping for binkies, as today's immersion-filled romp is children in the known world. Not specific children, but what's life like if you're a minor. One of the major focuses of Mystara is shaping your world, and settling down, raising a family, and joining the PTA, then buying some sensible shoes and a Chevrolet, and that's a major part of it. So what are your kids going to expect, and how do you set them up for future success? I'm Mr. Welch, and today we're going to party till we're broke and they drag us away because we're spending our kids' inheritance. First things you will notice, I'm not using pictures of actual children in this video because I learned my lesson from the sharing video and the Little Fears review. Putting up actual kid pictures, even in a video for adults, draws the wrath of the almighty algorithm. Kid diddlers and child killers, no problem, but actual kids, you can't have that. So enjoy the Coreys, Mr. Coleman, the Olsen twins, and of course Kurt Russell, so YouTube will actually share this video. First, the age of majority in Mystara varies from nation to nation, with most of them being from 16 to 18 years old, depending on location. For the races, it depends on the clan. For example, in Minorthed, or in Meditor, wasn't considered an adult until he hit 150. In Alfheim, the elves became the equivalent of teenagers at 20, but they aren't full adults until they hit 100 years old. Hin age similar to humans, but they aren't considered adults until they finish their Yalaran, meaning they aren't grown up until they are often well into their 20s and sometimes longer. Because few people are going to give responsibilities to a bunch of thrill-seeking teenagers going through their rite of passage. Dwarves reach maturity at 20 years old, but aren't considered full adults until they're 50. That's complicated. Because of clerical magic and advanced knowledge, childbirth is not as dangerous as it would normally be. In larger settlements and cities, many of the churches operate hospitals or will perform house calls to help the mother give birth. In rural areas, a wandering cleric will make it a point to visit expecting mothers and arrange to be there when she does give birth. The more remote areas, of course, will still have a problem with infant mortality. Even after the child is successfully born, there is still the risk of illness or accident, especially in rural communities. Cities can carry an increased risk of disease, but they also have easier access to clerical healing. With demi-humans, obviously this is quite different because of their abilities or their culture. Hin are well versed in medicine and birthing. Hin midwives are second to none, meaning deaths during childbirth are rare. Sylvan elves have access to ancient and powerful magics, including rare arcane healing spells. Elven deaths in childbirth are almost unheard of, which, considering how few children they have, is a very good thing. Dwarves, of course, are known for their durability, meaning Dwarven children are usually too stubborn to die. Their access to clerical magic also helps in the birthing process, but that usually isn't necessary. Gnomes share the Dwarven toughness to a degree, but also have a variety of inventions and devices created to help ease the birthing process. It goes without saying these are heavily tested before they are allowed anywhere near a pregnant woman. The one exception to demi-humans and their low infant mortality is the Shadow Elves. They are prone to birth defects because of the magical radiation that saturates their area. To prevent deformed children from becoming a burden on their already stressed resources, children are inspected at birth. Any physical defect means the child will be left to the elements in the caverns outside of Shadow Elf territory. This custom would seem cruel to outsiders, but without it the Shadow Elves would be hard-pressed to take care of the healthy members of their society. But it's not all dark, because their immortal patron Raphael oversees every child left in such a manner. He guides humanoids to find the deformed children, who will adopt the infants thinking they're some sort of humanoid. He doesn't let the Shadow Elves know that he does this, as he wants them to thrive with as little of his help as possible. Children's early education is based heavily on where they live and their family's wealth. For most poorer families, the children will be educated by one of the parents, typically the mother. In some villages, there might be a small schoolhouse or similar building where the children can be educated as a group, usually by a villager who can no longer work the fields. The truly rich can afford tutors or even a private school in the more advanced nations, and their children will be given the finest education in the known world. Families from developed nations can't afford private tutors, and they will turn to the various churches and temples who will teach children various subjects like reading and math, along with a heavy dose of the theological studies. This is assuming the child isn't automatically trained to help in the family's day-to-day life, like farm work or helping run a shop. The notable exception to this is the Irindi, which require by law all children to be educated in the public schools set up on the main island. All children of any race are expected to attend and will be given a thorough education on a variety of subjects. The schooling is only mandatory for a few years, but if the family wants the education to continue, the school will offer advanced classes. Otherwise, the child goes back to help with the family farm or business. Irindi is not a very populous nation, so a single large school building is able to handle the task adequately. It has resulted in the nation having the highest literacy rate in the known world, and helped unify the various cultures of the nation into a single identity. The only exception is the children of the albinos of Utter Island. Because of their religious nature, they're allowed to educate their children on their own, as long as they teach the children all the basics they would get at the primary school. With some nations, the children will be educated by wandering clerics or teachers who make a circuit of the small villages. Yularim is noted for this, where the clerics arrive to teach the children various lessons, such as reading and writing, as well as all the lessons of Al-Khalim, before heading to the next town the following day and repeating the lesson. It's not a perfect method, as the children are being educated just once a week. Still, with the nomadic culture of many of the Yulari and the distance between the smaller villages, it's the best that can be done. For nations like Glantry or Alphatia, children without magic are largely ignored when it comes time to educate them. Those lucky enough with families that can afford a teacher or a private school will at least get a basic education. Otherwise, teaching will be left up to the parents, assuming the child just doesn't help around the farm with little actual teaching outside of how to grow crops. This is a glaring problem with Glantry, as they don't even have religious schools like most nations. Poorer principalities like Clantyr or Krondahar have some of the worst literacy rates in all of the known world. Now, if you are a child who can learn magic, you have some of the finest schools available to you. However, competition between noble families for these schools is quite fierce, and there are fatalities. It's just as dangerous to live the harsh life of a farmer as deal with the lethal politics of Glantry and magical academies. Demi-human children are highly educated compared to human children. Elves have decades to teach their offspring all sorts of topics. Dwarven children share the same workaholic tendencies of their parents and actually enjoy homework. Hin prefer to teach children as communities, and schoolhouses are common. They might not offer a full range of topics compared to human schools, but the topics covered are far more in-depth. Gnomes have a natural curiosity, and their children are no exception. Gnomish education is equal parts kindergarten and technical college, especially in the city of Serain. Of course, shadow elves have to be different, because the ones that aren't left to the wolves are required to attend religious schools at the Temple of Raphael, where they get one of the most thorough religious educations in all of Mystara. We'll accept those born with the special purple birthmarks, because that means they're going to be educated in the temple as clerics. Children in numerous countries are often treated as political pawns, often set up in arranged marriages, or even adopted by more powerful families to ensure loyalty and vassals. Stefania Thincall was famously promised to an Oslan noble by her father to increase ties with the island nation. The marriage was arranged when she was only 14, and when she turned 17, the marriage did take place. It was short, as she stabbed him to death on their wedding night for reasons left still unspoken. But not all prearranged marriages end badly. Oren Medador of Minrathed and his wife are inseparable, with her even leaving her clan out of loyalty to her husband. Arranged marriages are rather common in most human cultures, and even with the races of Minrathed. Sometimes it's a welcome arrangement, especially among the Irindi who allow the child to make the choice to go through with it. Other times it can turn violent if the couple is not compatible. Most marriages are set up between nobles of the same nation. Events like the Stefania Thincall debacle are rare because of the international problems it creates. For children that can't get a proper education or don't join the family business, the most common option is apprenticeship. The family will find a master craftsman that can take in the child, typically in their early teens, and teach them the trade. This is preferred by many families because they can still visit their child, and the master is often a family friend. Some masters will even train multiple apprentices if they're successful enough. The craft learned depends on the location. For example, Irindi and Minrathed apprentices will usually spend most of their teen years at sea. Vestlander children will become smiths or other craftsmen because of the need for metal in their culture. The larger the town, the greater the opportunity, but the harder it is to become the apprentice for the better masters. The children that have the hardest time are often the ones with parents of different races. When the parents are different species, the child is always born as the race of the same-sex parent, which can cause all sorts of awkwardness growing up. A dwarven boy with a human mother is going to have to learn to shave before he hits 10. Elves outlive their human parents before they become adults. Human children living among the longer-lived races are going to become fully mature before the other children they grew up with hit puberty. There's no easy solution for dealing with this problem. Raise the child with their own kind, and there will be problems with the parent of a different race. Living with the parent's race, and they will have problems with the difference in lifespans with their parents. Literacy rates between children can vary. Several nations have languages that only exist on paper because some scholar decided to create an alphabet for them. The Ethengar have little use for books or scrolls. Their language only exists in spoken form for most of their people. Children are expected to help their mother keep the camp functioning, or learn their cultures through games that reinforce the Ethengarian traditions like wrestling and archery. Learning to read is not a major priority in the education of their children. Similarly, the Horse clan of Etrugan has no written language. Their children are taught to hunt and tend camp, but never to read. Unfortunately, one of the biggest threats to children, at least in the more wilderness areas, is that of slavery. Slavers prefer children because they're easy to intimidate or kidnap. Karamikos in particular requires parents to watch over children in the wilderness areas, as the Iron Ring are a very real threat. In nations where slavery is allowed, children are usually exempt or treated like house slaves, as they are of little use in the mines or the fields. The more public slavery is, the less likely children will be pressed into it, as that concept tends to disturb outsiders. In places where slavery is kept from prying eyes, like in Esterhold, child slaves will die at a much greater rate than adults. That's it for the children of Mystara. They have a little easier time of it than most, but they are also expected to find a career before they're fully grown. You're not taking one adventuring with you, but you might have a young teenager working in the town guard if necessary. If you've got players that have earned their domains and have settled down, now's the time to give them an heir and see how well they can handle being parents. If they ever decide to retire their character, maybe they want to play their offspring. Next week I'm looking at the games of Mystara, or what people do for fun. Until then, remember, when I was a very small boys talk to me. Now that we've grown up together, they're afraid of what they see.